Alrighty then, lads. Welcome to part 1, take 2 of building our first 10 stacker. This is take 2 because my last replay got corrupted again. It tends to happen. It's a fucking Mac, but we'll just deal with it and we're going to try again and move on. So basically the purpose of this video is this is going to be us getting a start on the 10 stacker. So I've got all of these little reference points behind me, all the boosters and stuff, and the barrels as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by making a barrel. So this is probably going to be a 3-part series for this little topic here. And we are just going to run with a standard XY barrel. So we've got here, we're going to put in some chests, probably. Yeah, chests. Chest. There we go. We're going to make ourselves a nice little barrel. So we'll put probably still ladder here. Again, the purpose of this barrel is to maximize exposure and also have the TNT on the right spots. So we're going to put a trapdoor there. And now, so we've sort of got this little barrel set up. So what I want to happen is I want our sand and our TNT to shoot in through that side there and hit these chests. That's the goal, that's to get the differing exposure so you can have this thing triangle in the best way possible. So, if we're going to want to shoot that there, we're going to want our power to sit here to shoot that. And so what we're going to do with that is we're going to put another trapdoor there. And we're going to make a little barrel like that. So the reason why I've picked a slab and I'm using a slab here is actually I'm trying to get the sand and what's going to be the hammer a bit lower down on these chests. So with less Y exposure, you're going to get more Z and X exposure. So you're going to get a higher velocity with those two directions with that. And we'll just fill in the rest of the barrel. So this is our barrel here, pretty much. So what we're going to think about now is we're going to start on the power. I've seen a lot of people tend to start on comps, a lot of people start on boosters. It's a bit hard to explain. Generally, I make everything separately and sort of piece the cannon together part by part instead of like building everything in the same area. But I'm going to build everything in the same area for this one. So with this TNT here, we're going to have our power drop in here. So we want a reasonable amount of power for this cannon. It's not going to be a cannon that's meant to force bases. This is going to be like a nice, easy little 10 stacker. You want to just blow some holes in some walls and stack 10 sands at a time. So we're not going to have all too much power. And what I'm sort of thinking power-wise is we're going to run about 100 to 150. So now that I sort of have that value, I'm going to start planning it out. So one thing that observers really lend themselves well towards is they power that sort of like 3x1 area in a straight line. So if we have a bit of a think about that, you want your powers in multiples of 3 in length. So what I mean by that is you sort of want your power set up to be like 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21 blocks long. Because for each of those multiples of 3, you just need that one row of observers. So what I'm thinking for this now is we're going to do 3 rows of 12, which will get us, calc 9 by 12, 108 power. So how we're going to do that is we're going to sort of start thinking. So we're going to leave just a little bit of a spacer here, and then we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is where we want our power to drop. Now, we're not going to be using any of these little boosters here. We're only really going to be using infinite boosters. These boosters are pretty much completely obsolete. I kind of just wanted to show them off because they are like they're a throwback, essentially. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sort of build a little bit of a framework for where we want to drop our power. So I'll run sort of something like this. And probably just like that. So this is a pretty rough framework of where I want to drop my power. So now what I'm thinking is how do we get all that power to this block here? And that's we're going to set up an infinite booster. So what we're going to do is have our first booster on the diagonal, just like that. See, that works there. That was our little test rig from last episode.
And now what we're going to do is we're going to have our first infinite booster. This is more than 7 blocks long, so it's only going to push like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's only going to do like that or something into the barrel, and we want to get everything. So what we are going to do here is we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 should do. So basically my thinking is here, these 2 boosters alone should be able to get all of these blocks into this block here. So if you need to put in more boosters, you can, and you can leave this spot like sort of empty. But for now, I think this should probably do it. I'm going to start making the boosters around that. So our first course of action is going to be to put in a line of cobblestone like that. And what we're actually going to do here is we're going to put 3 ladders. Now the reason why I'm using ladders here is because I want this booster here to give exposure to this front piece of TNT. Because this line of TNT here, this is what I'm sort of showing, will be showing to sort of like, it's what I'm using to show whether TNT is going to be dropping. So that TNT is actually going to be falling into these blocks here. And in order to get exposure to these sort of like last 2 blocks here, we actually want these ladders here. So if we had solid blocks here, and you tested that, it probably won't shoot those blocks forward. So we're going to use ladders instead. And now we'll just plan out our boosters. So we'll grab some dispensers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now we've got that little frame there. Just build some blocks around the bottom so we can have our very, very first booster here. And then we'll start building this up. So I'll just use 6 TNT for the first one, in that little diagonal area there, and yeah, that should be good. So we'll just put an observer here so we can shuffle everything forwards. So when this booster for here goes, we'll put an observer there as well. So now we've got a spot to power this booster. So basically what's going to happen is it's going to power, this observer here is going to power a piece of redstone here, which is going to power all 6 dispensers in this booster. Now additionally, once this bottom dispenser here gets fired as well, the observer is going to register the change in that dispenser, and it's actually going to send a signal through this booster here. So if we need to put a ladder here as well, so we can properly segment those boosters, we're going to do a nice little line of redstone, and we'll do a sticky piston and an observer. This is purely just to test. This is not what I'm going to be powering the cannon off. So what we're going to do is we're just going to fire it and just make sure these boosters work. Boom, boom. So you can see there, this booster here shuffles everything forwards up to this block here, and then this block here will shuffle everything forwards again. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start planning out our power. So I did say we wanted this 12 by 9 area, so what we're going to do is we're going to build up a couple of blocks. Now the reason why I'm building up a couple of blocks here is because we need that line of redstone underneath for the pistons to function. So what we can do is we can do it out to here. This is going to be our little line of redstone. And then we're going to go, so we got TNT there. So we'll just go dispenser, 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 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Get our dispensers planned out. And at this point we can just, we'll leave these blocks here actually, just for the time being, as a reference point. So that's our row of dispensers there. That's what we want to be powering with our observer wiring. So if we have a little bit of a think about that, what we're going to need is we need that row of blocks underneath. This is going to be carrying our redstone signal along. Up to here. And we're going to put that redstone there. That's what's going to be powering the pistons on the back. So we're going to place a piston there, there, and there. You can see this is why I said you wanted to go with these multiples of 3 as well. Because it lines up really nicely. You can see these 3 rows of observers here are going to power that entire section of dispensers there. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to stack these observers up, stack 11 up, and we're also going to stack these dispensers at the front up too. So since we know that 12 blocks is the maximum push limit of a piston, we have gone for all 12 blocks here to maximize the amount of power we're going to get. Jesus, full Joe Biden there. To maximize the amount of power we're going to get. So I'm going to put some pistons at the top. This is for the reset function for these pillars of observers. I'm going to do that just like that. I personally prefer to have that little framework there so it's a bit easier to build in the scheme. You don't have to do that. So we will just have that set up there now. So you can see we've got those 3 lines of observers
We've got the reset function at the top where it'll push it back down, and we've got the line of redstone underneath. So what we're actually going to do now is we're going to copy this over. So we're going to copy it there. When you run / copy, it always takes a scan from a certain reference point. So if I'm standing here, that's the reference point at which it's going to take this copy. So if I copy that, it's now, this redstone is now going to appear right in front of where I'm standing. So if I run / paste, boom, you can see it's right there. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to rotate it 180. And now if you can picture this in your head, it's sort of rotated around us. So instead of standing here and pasting it, we're going to stand up here. And we're just going to run / paste. Boom. Look at that. Identical. So what I'm going to do just very quickly is I'm going to cover these dispensers up here. This will help you a lot later if you get into the habit of covering up these dispensers. It's basically just so you can auto your cannons at high speeds. I'll go more in depth into that in a little bit, but it's just a good habit to get into now. So the reason why we have these two distinct sets of power here is for all the cannons, pretty much all the cannons where we want to stack sand, we actually need 2 powers. I'll do a full in-depth explanation after I finish the power here, but basically all you need to know for the time being is if you want to stack more than 1 sand, you're going to need 2 separate powers to do it. So what we're going to do is this. So while you are using the 3 powers here, it is important to keep in mind that you will need a separation between the 3 powers? What am I saying? 2 powers. You will need a separation of, it's commonly between 2, 3, and 4 redstone ticks. In this specific example that I'm going to run through here, I'm going to use a 3 redstone tick offset between the 2 powers. So we have 1 there, 2 there, 3 there. The reason why I'm not just using a single repeater is you'll recall in one of the earlier episodes that the repeater increases the pulse length. So what we're doing here is actually using 3 single ticked repeaters just to ensure we have a quick pulse running through so we don't end up locking up the other side. So what we're going to do from here is we are going to think of a way to power this. Now the easiest way to probably power this, for me, is going to go 1, and we're going to switch to rails here just to transmit the signal, and then we're going to go 2, and then we can just wrap that around. One thing I am going to do here is I'm going to replace this with a slab, because basically if we replace that with a slab, it's only like transparent, and basically this comes back to the bud powering stuff. I just don't want this dispenser underneath it to bud power, and I'm worried if I have a solid block there, it's going to bud power that dispenser. I'll go like fully in depth into that later as well, but for now, actually instead of even worrying about that, what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to raise the power up another block, so we just don't even run into that issue at all. So I'm just going to copy the area, and we're just going to move it up by 1, move 1 up, bang. So you can see now we've got that raised, and we can just have a nice little line from there to there. So now this is our power fully assembled. We're going to remove this TNT here, and we're going to remove that there. We got these 2 chests in the middle here. They're just not appearing on my screen for some reason. So what we have now is we have our power and some boosters for the power. So, oops, I didn't actually raise this section here as well. I'll just do that very, very quickly. What we're going to do now is we're going to do something called tick counting, where we actually count the timings for each of these components to go off. Now the reason we're doing this is so that we have a common reference point for when we're adding future attachments to this cannon. So generally the things you need to keep in mind are your power timings and your hammer timings. I'll get into the hammer in this video, but just not for now. So what we are going to do is, since we are feeding this power from this redstone here, and this redstone here is powering that, we're going to count from this redstone line here. So an observer is 1 redstone tick, observer 2 redstone ticks, observer 3 redstone ticks, and then piston 4 redstone ticks, observer 5 redstone ticks. So after that redstone here is powered, 5 redstone ticks later, the first power is going to go off. And you'll remember that we did do a little line of repeaters here to trigger the second power as well. So we're going to count from here again, 1 redstone tick, 2, 3, oops, 4, 5, 6, and then piston, which is 7, observer, which is 8. So our first power is going off at 5 redstone ticks. First power, 5 RST. second power 8 RST. So I recounted the first power here to 5, and this power here goes off at 8. So what we're going to do now is we're going to count the boosters as well. So we're going to go from here, 1, your first booster here is going off at 1, your first booster here is going off at 2. Basically, you want to leave a little bit of time between when this final booster here goes off and when the power explodes, so that everything can be pushed up to the front. So about 3 ticks should do for this cannon. So all we have left to do now is to test it. You can see that fires, both sides of the pistons go off. Let's turn, oh, TNT fill. Didn't fill properly. Let's try that again. 1, 2. Bang, bang, bang. So you can see everything gets perfectly shuffled up into this block here. So that's exactly what we want for our little setup for the time being. So what we're going to do now is we're sort of going to have a think. Basically, we'll go back to the barrel. I think that's probably going to be the easiest way to explain this. So we have our 2 powers here. Now when our first power goes off, because of the exposure difference, say we're shooting the sand first, we get ourselves a piece of sandstone, shooting this sand first, what's going to happen is this power is going to get shot up into this block here. Standard triangle stuff. If you don't know about the triangles, I think 3 videos ago I did an in-depth explanation of how these things work. So it's going to go up, and then now it's going to go across. Now the difference between this cannon and all the cannons we've done previously is this is going to be needing to use 2 powers. So about 95% of cannons that stack sand like this need 2 powers. I'll get into why. So basically we've just shot this sand at the wall. Now basically what's going to happen is why we need a separation between that sand and the next part of the cannon, which is actually called the hammer, is so that this sand's going to fall a little bit. We're letting the force of gravity pull this sand down a little bit on the wall. So our first power here, when this goes off, we shoot our sand out. Now what's going to happen is we have a 3 redstone tick offset between our first power and our second power. Now what we're going to be shooting with our second power is something called the hammer. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Basically what the hammer does is it fucking smashes everything back down. So after the sand has fallen a little bit, the hammer will hit the wall 0.3 of a second or 3 redstone ticks later. And then a bit after it hits the wall there, the hammer's going to physically fire down every single piece of sand like that. It's going to go boom. Now I'm not 100% sure like the physics behind that and why Minecraft actually does that. I just know that it works. So basically, the reason you need a hammer is because you need all this sand here to hit the bottom of where you want to stack in a single game tick. So if you want to stack, say, 10 sand, you're gonna need if you're shooting 10 sand at the wall, you're gonna need more than 10 hammer. So it's a bit hard to explain. It's a bit hard to get your head around initially. But basically, the ratio of your sand to your hammer, just get this. So for every 1 piece of sand that you want to fire down, so we set that as 1, you're going to need approximately 1.15 to 1.3 pieces of TNT per sand. So in this very specific case here, we're running with a 10 stacker. So in this case, we're going to go from the higher number here. If we want to stack 10 sand, we need about 11.5 TNT, which is impossible, to about 13 TNT. So what we're going to run with this cannon is we're going to run 13 TNT. So it's going to take a bit of getting used to. But basically this is, from every cannon now onwards, you're going to need pretty much 2 powers. There's some specific cases with some other cannons where you don't actually need 2 powers, but for this cannon here, we're going to be needing 2 powers. So, big yawn. So, what we're going to do from here is we are going to start thinking about how we want to set this up. So, since we need 2 separate powers, we need 2 separate packages within our barrel. We need our sand and our hammer.
we're also going to need 2 separate boosters and 2 separate compartments, so we can have these things completely separated. So the standard convention for this is you'll have your first booster here. This is for your hammer. So this is going to be our hammer here. What's going to happen is the hammer's going to be shot forwards just like the power. You can wire this exactly like the power pretty much. It's going to be shot forwards into this block here, at which point we're going to shoot it up into the slab and then across into the barrel. We're also going to do the same thing for our sand. Now the reason why I prefer having the sand a little bit further across is because it's very, very easy to time out the boosters. Now what I mean by that is when you have your final boosters, so we're going to need boosters like these things, these big stacks of boosters here. What we can actually do is we can carry a signal, say from some infinite boosters here. We can go booster, booster, and then booster, booster, booster or something. This is just purely an example. But what you can do after this is you can power the piston for this booster here, and then you can use the observers from that booster to power the next booster along. So I'm pretty sure you can have it around the other way. This is just personal preference, and 95% of people do it, where they actually have their sand at the back like that. So with that being said, what we're going to start looking at now is how we can get this sand into the barrel. So basically, if you didn't sort of realize already, we're going to need about 13 TNT here to stack that sand, and we're also going to need 10 pieces of sand. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to be using something called a sand compressor. So I probably won't, I guess we can finish it in this video. But basically, what the sand compressor is going to be doing is it's going to be a very, very specialized setup that for now only deals with sand. So what we'll do is we're going to start having a think. How can we get 10 sand into a very small area, and how can we boost it with a single booster? So we're actually going to have 5 pistons like this. And we're going to picture our sand will be falling onto these blocks here. And what we're going to do is, I talked about this in a very, very early video. What we can actually do is we can pulse this piston twice, or this row of pistons twice. And we can do that using a repeater, specifically set to 3 ticks. Now this is like a very, very specific timing for this repeater, but basically if you want to double pulse a sand comp like this, if you use a 3 redstone tick pulse, it's going to double pulse it going into an observer. You can do it with 4 redstone ticks as well, but you need 3 redstone ticks for sand. I'll show you why in just a second. So we need a quick pulse for this actually. So the reason why I'm sort of doing this a little bit separate is this is a big habit that I always get into. I try and always have the parts of my cannons in separate areas. So I never try and run like something that's meant to be powering the hammer into, say, I'm just going to neaten that up a little bit just so it registers. I'm never going to be running, say, the clock for my sand comp from the power. So I always like having everything separate because it makes it super easy. If you want to like chop and change cannons, you can simply just copy and paste different sand comps into different cannons. This is what I prefer to do. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have a piston there, and we're going to have a button here. This is purely just for demonstrative purposes. But if we fire that, you should see that it goes, oops, I don't actually have redstone on top. So we're just going to be using that redstone on top. Fire. You can see that fires twice in quite a short interval. Now the reason we're doing that is because we can actually get 2 sand out per piston into this booster area. So if we push that, you can see it's dropped 10 pieces of sand. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a bit of a think. How are we going to get this sand forwards? So since we've pushed all of this sand into an entity, we're actually going to have a booster here. So what we'll do is we will make ourselves a little bit of a booster. 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Cute little thing. Just be aware, if this
doesn't have enough power, you'll need to switch from this wiring method to say something like that over there, where you need more power in this little booster here. But basically what we're going to do is we have our booster here. We don't want the water flowing everywhere, so we'll just build that up a little bit. And since we don't want the water flowing everywhere again, just at the very bottom, and so no sand gets jammed in the booster, we're going to put a row of trapdoors. So basically what that's going to do is if the booster's mistimed or something in the server, the sand isn't going to stack in the booster and get everything clogged up. What it's actually going to do is it's just going to break on the trapdoor. Now from here, what I'm sort of thinking we'll do is we will run our little feed for this section here. A couple ways we can do that, and sort of, funnily enough, the way I'm thinking for it here is we're actually going to run it out like this. 5, 6, and try 7 first, and then let's get ourselves that little bit there. I'm not too stressed if I make this cannon quite messy, because this is going to be like a little test rig cannon, I guess, because all the things that I'm going to teach you in future, before we add them to, say, a 256 or a 384, I'm going to be showing you on this little cannon here. So, we've got a little wiring loop here for this piston, which will quick pulse that repeater there, which will then get that 3-tick difference. So what we're going to do now, exactly like our old school little hybrid cannon, we're just going to put in some repeaters, and we're going to start playing around with this just to see if we can time this right for the sand. TNT fill, and then we'll get a button, and we'll just power it from here. I kind of don't have sand, eh? MS. So there's something on Crystal called Magic Sand. It's kind of like a sand bot on Complex, and it'll just place sand where you want it to place sand, just like that. Now, before we do fire this, because we don't want this little thing here shooting everything into pretty much fucking Narnia, we're going to build ourselves a little barrel. So we're going to have something like that. So, as discussed in a much earlier video, like 2 episodes ago, what am I saying? Everything triangles up first. So the reason why we have this little barrel here is so we can shoot this all up and then across. So if we fire that again, we'll see how close we got. That's messy as hell. I love that. I've just physically shot out all of that sand right out the back as well. So I'm going to play around with the timers a little bit. I'm going to see if I can make it a bit shorter. See if that helps. Oops, just pressed a random button. This is disgusting. This has gone horribly wrong already. Maybe I need to make it later. That looks pretty close. I don't think it was getting like enough velocity though. This is an awful way to do this. This is absolutely awful, but we're going to make it work. I don't know if that was 10 sand or what. What you can do for a setup like this as well is you can put some webs on the wall. So since we're firing 10 sand, we want 10 sand to be hitting those webs. So we'll just fire that again. See if it pushes. And we're going to run a command called /CE. And what that's going to do is that's going to clear all these entities on these blocks. So that actually just shot, or it cleared, sorry, 7 pieces of sand. So I'm going to reduce the tick and see if that makes it any better. That actually looked pretty good, CE. 5 pieces of sand. Okay, that wasn't as good. Let's try that again. 2, 5. Yeah, so yeah, ideally we want this to be doing 10 pieces. CE. It's 10 sand, but it did spray it out a little bit out the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some blocks around it. This is a pretty half-assed compressor, so I'm not too stressed about that. but we'll just do that for now. Don't really need those blocks there either. Yeah, there you go. /CE. Hey, we got 10 pieces of sand. So this is our very, very first sand compressor here. So we're physically firing 10 pieces of sand out of this, and yeah, shooting it into these cobwebs here. So apart from that, that's pretty much going to be today's little video here. So this is our very, very first sand compressor. This is what we're going to be using to shoot the sand into the booster, from the booster into the barrel, and then we're going to be using that hammer as well to stack on the wall. I'll be getting much more in depth on the hammer and sort of the booster setup in the next video. But apart from that, I'll catch you all later. So might do another video today, depending on how I feel, or it'll probably just be Monday. So yeah, I'll catch you all later.